Friday, January 17th, 2020, 12:30 p.m. Roach's Line, Conception Bay North, Newfoundland. Joshua Wall buttoned his coat against the wind, 26 years old, anxious about the weather, but feeling better than he had that morning. He texted his friend in Marysvale, 10 kilometers by road, or there was the backcountry trail through the woods, faster if you knew the way. The snow had already started, small flakes at first, deceptive in their delicacy. By the time he entered the tree line at 1 o'clock, the world had gone white. His last text came at 1 p.m. Lost, phone battery low, then silence. 70 kilometers east in St. John's, CBC meteorologist Ashley Brauweiler had arrived at the station before dawn, 6:30 a.m., preparing to explain what was coming. The weather models showed something unprecedented, even for Newfoundland. She didn't yet realize she would be stranded at work that night, snowshoeing home the next morning through a city transformed into something unrecognizable. By Friday evening, Newfoundland faced what meteorologists would later call a bomb cyclone, a storm system undergoing bombogenesis, its central pressure dropping so rapidly it drew surrounding air into its vortex, like water down a drain. The storm's central air pressure dropped quickly, causing sustained winds in parts of Newfoundland and Labrador to reach 74 miles per hour or greater, with higher gusts. This wasn't just a snowstorm, this was atmospheric violence. The blizzard struck with the force of a hurricane wrapped in winter. Wind gusts exceeded 100 kilometers per hour for 15 consecutive hours in St. John's. At the airport, the anemometer recorded 134 kilometers per hour before it failed completely. Forecasters would later estimate winds exceeded 150 kilometers per hour in the capital. Further out, at Green Island in Fortune Bay, gusts reached 171 kilometers per hour. The snow came horizontally. St. John's Fire Chief, Sherry Colford, watched from the Emergency Operations Center as visibility collapsed to zero. Even the snowplows, those sturdy workhorses of Newfoundland winters, were pulled from the roads. You couldn't see, you couldn't breathe. The wind turned snowflakes into projectiles that stung exposed skin and created whiteouts so complete that firefighters standing at the curb couldn't see buildings across the street. 76.2 centimeters of snow fell in 24 hours at St. John's Airport, 30 inches in a single day, shattering the previous record of 68.4 centimeters set on April 5, 1999. Mount Pearl, just outside the capital, received 93 centimeters. But the numbers alone couldn't capture what was happening. The wind sculpted the snow into drifts that defied comprehension. Snowdrifts as high as 15 feet formed against buildings and vehicles, trapping people indoors for several days. Cars vanished entirely. First-floor windows disappeared behind walls of white. People who opened their doors Friday evening found themselves facing solid barriers of packed snow, unable to exit their homes. Christina Smith, a 60-year-old musician living in the Outer Battery neighborhood, would later describe snow piled up to your neck as she and her husband attempted to tunnel pathways from their front door. The Battery, that historic cluster of colorful row houses clinging to the cliffs above St. John's Harbour, became a fortress of snow. Late Friday, an avalanche roared down the hillside, snow cascading into one home. The residents escaped unharmed, but the message was clear. Even the landscape itself had turned hostile. By midnight Friday, St. John's had declared a state of emergency. So had Paradise, Mount Pearl, and communities across the Avalon Peninsula. All businesses ordered closed. All non-emergency vehicles banned from roads. 21,000 homes were left without power. The city went dark and silent, buried. Saturday morning arrived with an eerie stillness. The wind had dropped, but what it revealed was staggering. Ashley Fitzpatrick, 28 years old, had posted time-lapse footage from her security camera showing her vehicles slowly disappearing beneath the accumulation. By Saturday, only the roof of her smaller car remained visible. She ventured outside with thousands of other residents to begin the dig-out, then stopped, overwhelmed. Where do you even begin? Fire Chief Colford's crews faced an impossible calculus. Medical emergencies didn't pause for blizzards, but the trucks couldn't move. "We've actually had to park and walk for medical calls and to check on businesses," she told reporters. Firefighters trudged through waist-deep snow, sometimes on foot, sometimes requiring snowplow escorts just to inch forward a few blocks. The power outages created their own emergencies. In basement apartments, residents found themselves trapped, doors blocked by drifts, windows buried, exits sealed. Neighbors dug frantically to free people they could hear shouting from inside their homes. 70 kilometers west, in the woods between Roach's Line and Marysvale, searchers couldn't even begin looking for Joshua Wall. The storm had created an impenetrable barrier. His father Wayne stood at the window, helpless. "My son is out there somewhere," he would tell reporters later. "He's most likely cold. Hopefully he's hung up into a shelter." The search couldn't start until Saturday. By then, Joshua had been missing for more than 24 hours, somewhere in the wilderness, in sub-zero temperatures, with a phone battery that had died Friday afternoon. By Sunday, Newfoundland Premier Dwight Ball used a word that resonated: historic. The province requested federal assistance, and on Sunday evening, the Canadian Armed Forces mobilized. 300 troops from CFB Petawawa rolled into the Avalon Peninsula, equipped with bison armored vehicles and the kind of determination that comes from being called in when civilian machinery fails. They arrived to find neighborhoods that looked like the surface of an alien planet, familiar streets transformed into canyons of white, landmarks obliterated, the basic geography of human settlement erased beneath uniform. Whiteness. The troops joined local crews in the Sisyphean task of moving mountains of snow. The Department of Transportation and Works handled more than 100 requests for assistance Friday, including 24 from ambulances, 23 from police, and 60 from the public. Snowmobiles became emergency vehicles. Snowshoes became standard equipment. People who had lived in Newfoundland their entire lives, who had weathered decades of harsh winters, admitted they'd never seen anything like this. At grocery stores that finally received permission to open Monday, lines stretched around blocks. People waited hours for basics: milk, bread, batteries. The lineup at the Merry Meeting Sobeys snaked through the parking lot before the doors even opened at 10 a.m., everyone shaking their heads in shared disbelief. Newfoundland power crews worked around the clock, patrolling on foot where vehicles couldn't reach, assessing damage to power lines buried under drifts or snapped by accumulation and wind. By Saturday, they'd restored power to 75% of affected customers, but thousands still sat in the dark, in the cold, waiting. The state of emergency lasted 8 days. 8 days before businesses fully reopened. 8 days before the vehicle ban lifted. 8 days during which a city of over 200,000 people essentially stopped functioning, locked in place by a single storm's fury. St. John's International Airport remained closed until Monday night. Schools across the Avalon Peninsula stayed shut. The basic assumption of modern life, that you can move freely, that roads exist, that infrastructure functions, dissolved in the face of nature's raw power. The search for Joshua Wall continued through those days, hampered by additional snowfall, by the sheer volume of white covering the landscape. Ground teams, police dogs, snowmobiles, helicopters, all searching the wilderness between Roach's Line and Marysvale. On Tuesday, January 21st, after 4 exhaustive days, police suspended the official search. Wayne Wall and family members continued on their own, hoping for snowmelt, for any sign. On Saturday morning, January 25th, a call came in. A body had been found off Roach's Line. The RCMP confirmed it was Joshua Wall. He'd been missing for 8 days. The storm that buried St. John's had taken a life, had left a family shattered, had demonstrated that even in 2020, with all our technology and preparation and meteorological sophistication, nature still held absolute veto power over human plans. When the numbers were finally tallied, they told a story of extremes. 76.2 centimeters of snow in St. John's in 24 hours, a new all-time record. The first time St. John's Airport measured more than 100 centimeters of snow on the ground since January 7, 2014. Wind gusts that likely exceeded 150 kilometers per hour in the capital, with 171 kilometers per hour measured at Green Island. Drifts reaching 15 feet high, 21,000 homes without power, 300 armed forces personnel deployed, a state of emergency lasting over a week, but numbers alone can't capture what it meant to live through it. The storm revealed something about vulnerability, about how quickly the systems we depend on can be overwhelmed, about how a single weather event can turn a modern city into an Arctic outpost, isolating residents more completely than any siege. It also revealed something about resilience, neighbors digging out neighbors, strangers checking on elderly residents, the dark humor that Newfoundlanders wielded against catastrophe, social media filling with images of people skiing down unplowed streets, snowboarding off buried cars, making the best of impossible circumstances with the kind of grim joy that comes from surviving something together. CBC meteorologist Ashley Brauweiler, who snowshoed home Saturday morning after being stranded at the station overnight, later reflected on witnessing the storm's full fury. "I knew what was coming, but it was hard to conceptualize what was about to unfold, because we'd never seen this before," she said. "It was a day I'll never forget, and exactly why I became a meteorologist. Mother Nature's sheer strength is incredible." 5 years later, residents still call it Snowmageddon, the storm of a generation. The blizzard that reminded everyone, even in a place where winter is a constant companion, where people pride themselves on toughness and preparation, that nature still writes the rules. Joshua Wall's death stands as a somber reminder of the stakes, of what can happen when you misjudge the weather, when you underestimate winter's power, when you step into conditions that can kill in hours. On Friday, January 17, 2020, at 12:30 p.m., a 26-year-old man left his house to walk to a friend's place. By 1 p.m., he was lost. By the time searchers could even begin looking, the landscape had been completely rewritten. Some storms pass through and fade from memory. Others etch themselves permanently into the geography of a place, becoming part of its identity, its mythology, its cautionary tales passed down through generations. Newfoundland had weathered countless winter storms before January 2020. It will weather countless more after. But this one, with its bomb cyclone fury, its record-shattering snow, its 15-foot drifts and hurricane winds and 8-day siege, this one became the measuring stick. The storm that proved that even paradise can be buried, that even home can become unreachable, that even the most prepared community can find itself utterly overwhelmed. When people in St. John's talk about winter now, they reference it. Before Snowmageddon, after Snowmageddon. It divided time. It changed assumptions. It left scars in the form of emergency protocols updated, infrastructure reinforced, respect deepened for what winter can do when it decides to truly show its strength. The snow eventually melted. The power came back on. The streets were cleared. Life resumed. But the memory remains, frozen in place, like those cars buried to their roofs, like those first-floor windows vanished beneath white walls, like a young man lost in woods that became, in hours, a lethal maze of snow and cold and wind. Nature doesn't negotiate, it doesn't compromise, and on January 17th, 2020, it reminded Newfoundland and the world watching in awe that some forces remain beyond human control. No matter how modern we become, no matter how much we think we've conquered winter. The blizzard came, buried everything, and left a lesson written in 7-meter drifts. Respect the storm.